Welcome to another edition of Transformational Astrology. With me, I'm Henry Seltzer. And we want to take a look at this full moon that's coming up this weekend, following the recent eclipse, which was just before the beginning of the current April month. And let's go ahead and take a look at the chart. So you should be able to see the chart now. And as usual, we're doing the natural chart with Aries, then Taurus, then Gemini, defining the first, second, third, etc. houses. And the reason we do this is because if we use the actual rising, we'd be really doing a reading just for the West Coast, which is where I am right now in California. But we don't want to do that. We want to do something that's a little bit more general to show the general positions. And you can see the rising as this kind of mark, indicating the rising point in the time passages software. And it's very interesting, some of the things that we can see here. Of course, first of all, we're still in Aries, Sun in Aries, right in between Chiron and Eris as a 2-degree aspect, and then, of course, really closer to Chiron, so partile conjunct Chiron, and that's going to be of interest, and we'll talk about that. Opposite 23 degrees Libra moon, so it does indicate also to some extent that we're taking others into account with this full moon, as with all full moons, and it is in Libra as well. So has something to do with relationship, has something to do with communication. In the Gemini portion of this chart, we do see Jupiter kind of emphasized, trine to the moon and stuff. So there's a certain amount of just general idea of the air element, with the moon in Libra, with Jupiter and Gemini. Therefore communication, therefore thought process, thinking about the situation, which I think we're all somewhat thinking about the situation. Things are kind of up in the air and all around with what's happening in the United States government at the moment. We also have to think about as well in this particular configuration, because we're coming off of the recent retrograde of Mercury, which did finally turn direct. When it turns direct, it's still stationary in the sky. So that's important to recognize that moment, which was on Monday, is really kind of the past Monday of the 7th, is just kind of, the beginning of getting out of the retrograde. It really is a peak moment of the retrograde with Mercury standing dead still. And also it was combined with Venus and with Saturn when it did turn to direct motion, and now it's a little bit further along. It's a few more degrees into almost the end of Pisces, therefore getting close to Neptune. So we have Mercury-Neptune in this full moon, which is of significance. In other words, our thoughts are going to be bending toward the cosmic. At the same time as we have to be practical, which there's a lot of that going on with the recent conjunction, which is still valid, of Saturn with Mercury also. And in fact, what we have is Saturn at 25 degrees of Pisces and Uranus at 25 degrees of Taurus. So that has become a perfect sextile. It's actually been active all year, and it's active also in January of 2026, and I can show you that. I thought I'd take a moment to just show you that. So in the time passages software, I create a new chart, and I say duplicate, and I don't call it anymore. I call it Saturn, Uranus, and we can even save it like that, and that would save it. And then when we save it, in the time passages software, you have different folders you can use. We're using the file system, so we have charts, we have folders under charts. We can save it wherever we want. I'll just go back to column, I guess, so I can look at the most recent, and then go to that directory, and I'll save it there. So we're using the file system to save these charts, which is very handy because you can look at the most recent, you can look at it by name, you have subfolders. So I'll save it. This is sort of the way Word would work. with having different documents. So we have different charts under one. And now we have a window. We have two charts. We have this new one we just created. And this new one, I wanted to demonstrate that we can go back and forth in time. So if I go forward a month at a time, we can see what's happening here. And this is by shortcut keys I'm doing. So that brings us to May 12th. So you can see that, in May 12th, a month from now, we have Saturn at 28 Pisces, 59, and we have Uranus at 27. So they're still conjunct. So that's my point. If we look even at July here, at that point, Saturn has gone into Aries, Saturn at 1 degrees Aries, and guess what? Uranus is at 0 degrees of Gemini. So this sextile, what I'm trying to show you here, and of course, Pluto is involved too, being in the trine. So this is a particularly strong time for also Pluto transformation. It's going to be an interesting summer in that way. And then if we look a little bit further, you can see that then it gets a little bit less. So the fall is not quite as strong, and then October it's even weaker. But then take a look at January. So in January of 2026, they're coming back together. You see we have Saturn, 28 degrees of Pisces. We have Uranus, 27 degrees of Taurus. So they stay together for a while. It's not going to take that much longer. Of course, they're not going to stay together all that time. It's beginning to fade away. So this is a phenomenon. The reason I bring this up is it's actually a very interesting phenomenon because we have antithetical elements. Saturn is about structure, it's about the rules, it's about the constraints. It could be about government, it's about how society is organized. Uranus is about no rules. It's about what Jeff Green called freedom from the known, or freedom from authority, rebellion. So that you have rebellion and then you have authority, and somehow combining them. And it's quite interesting. Rick Tarnas published Cosmos and Psyche. He didn't cover this particular combination. And we're looking at a sextile. We're not looking at an opposition, which he likes to look at the oppositions, conjunctions, and the squares in between. So this is a little bit more compatible. They may be more organized. These two archetypes of Saturn and Uranus may be more organized to be working with each other. But that leads to some very interesting thoughts. And I do want to give a quote from Rick, because he wrote an article, I think it was in 2016, it was published, that covered some of these other combinations. And listen to what he says. Saturn-Uranus, when we see these, in very close connection now, unexpected problematic events, crises and schisms, accidents, structural breakdown, crashes of stock markets and airlines, technical breakdowns, conflict between conservative versus liberal progressive, authority versus rebellion. So we do see a bit of that. And then the other thing that's quite fascinating is that he mentions also that they can combine in different ways. And there's a way that both archetypes can be combined in a single event, so that you have, for example, he mentions at the onset of the Civil War, there was a rebellion in order to pursue repression. What do I mean? The rebellion was by the slaveholding states. They wanted to continue their process of enslavement of humans working on their fields, which was economically viable, as we all know. So you see what that is? That's acting like it's a rebellion, but it's actually for the purpose of repression. So he goes on about that a bit. And I'll just quote again. There is also the idea, he comments about the Bolshevik Revolution during the Saturn-Uranus opposition of 1917, was also, it became authoritarian. So it was a rebellion from the Tsar, but it became authoritarian. And so on, including, he mentions, there may be a majority population attempting through democratic means, acting like it's a new innovation, to restrict, exclude, or deport minority populations. And we are seeing that right now, aren't we? That's sort of what's going on with this administration. So in other words, it can be, when you think about it, a Saturn-Uranus combining so that it's repressive in the name of innovation. I think we're seeing a little bit of that going on right now. And then, of course, it also represents resistance. The entrenched, determined, that's the Saturn part of it. Resistance, that's the the part that resists what the authority is trying to accomplish. So there's that going on too. So so it's refreshing to think about how closely the astrological archetypes can really symbolize what we're seeing in the zeitgeist, because this is a current chart, this is a current full moon chart. And just to mention, also, Venus is stationary in the sky right here. An hour after this moment of 5 p.m. PDT, an hour later, Venus actually stations at this same 24 Pisces. I can right-click on it. And we have the current retrograde ends 24 Pisces, 3729. So that's pretty much where we are right here. You see 24 Pisces, 3729 is the position at the moment. So anyway, 1 hour later, it's considered to be dead still in the sky. So this means that Venus at 2437, next to Saturn at 24 Pisces, 54 minutes, very close to it, is really strengthening this whole Saturn-Uranus situation. So it's something to think about that we have in this full moon moment coming up on Saturday afternoon. We might very well see even more demonstrations like we've been seeing. There was a tremendous amount of demonstrations over the last weekend. I don't want to talk politics, but you can think about it as applying to your own life as well. Where are you somewhat stuck in your entrenchment of your habit patterns, and where might you be almost on the verge of breakout? And on the other hand, is there a means of evolution, Uranus representing an evolutionary process of departure from the old norm? And whereas something like that going on in your life, where you can actually stick to it, you can apply the solidness of this solid position, emphasized position of Saturn in Pisces at 25 degrees. We have also, don't forget, Eris at 25 degrees, one sign over, and then we have Uranus. So Eris, representing soul intention, is coming into this, and we have a chance to really kind of explore to our depths. What is our soul intention? What is our purpose? What are we really after? What is the internal moral code that we can adhere to and find our truth, find a way to, this is where I stand. And that's very important also. And it does involve this process of change, this evolutionary change that's going on within the society at the moment. So all this is very powerful. We want to mention also that there is a very strong biquintile yod that's going on. Oh, is that right? Yeah, it's biquintile. Both. Oh no, let's see. This is Jupiter here. No, it's a sesquiyod. I'm sorry, not a biquintile, sesqui. My bad there. So the sesquiyod, meaning that there's a sesquiquadrate that's quite close, because Haumea is at 2 degrees, and this is 2 degrees further than 15 degrees, you see. So each one of these is a 135 degree aspect. And you can put the mouse on the other one too and see. So sesquiquadrate, and then a square between them, a sesquiyod to Jupiter from Pluto and Haumea. And this is another theme, I've been mentioning it, that Pluto with Haumea seems to be about the question of truth versus lies, because Pluto shows what's really going on, looking at the whole depth of the situation, the detective work to really understand what's underneath the covers, so to speak, with Pluto, and then you have this issue of the moral imperative, do the right thing. It's also love of nature, love of animals, but in this case, it has to do with internal moral compass. It has to do with, you might call natural law, finding the right thing to do in a given situation, including telling the truth as far as you can. So truth versus lies, and then the lies coming out. I've seen it over and over again when these guys are triggered. We might be seeing more of that right now. Can we see where the falsehoods on either side are being exposed? So that's another factor. It's very active. This is a very active full moon. I mean, we also have between Mercury at 28 Pisces and almost 28 of Cancer with Mars, so there's a very strong impetus to say our truth, to say our thoughts, to think our thoughts, and really kind of come to some kind of conclusion about where we stand, what's up, what's going on. And with all that, we have this very close conjunction of the Sun in this full moon chart with Chiron, partile, same degree, 23 degrees, also with Eris. And this really involves a little bit more thoughtfulness here of identifying the wound. In other words, there's a way that we can avoid thinking about our own inner nature where we might have wounded parts of ourselves. There's a way that as a culture we can avoid thinking about what's the serious flaw in the culture, which in our current culture we might call it materialism, we might call it income inequality, we might call it making money the god, and everything has to be depending on that, when we know damn well that there are other gods in our universe. Or at least there should be. So that's something to think about too. It has to do with the culture and where we're headed, and the cultural movement and where that's headed, whatever movement we're talking about, including the right wing, including the left wing, or the progressives. And it includes not only identifying the wound, but doing something about it. That would be the healing. Chiron is called the wounded healer. And it does involve, in a personal situation, it involves being aware of where your own internal wounds might be. I call it the residue of early childhood trauma, that it's undigested. It's something at the time we couldn't deal with as a child, so we put it aside. We don't go there. We don't want to think about it. It's shameful, perhaps. It's unpleasant, perhaps. It's painful to remember it. But the idea of the sun shining right there on Chiron is to recognize that we have to be more conscious of our inner wounded places. This is very important also in our individual arc of development, that you don't get very far with hidden complexes that can take over and give you reactivity, and all of a sudden you're shouting. A friend of mine says you're never angry for the reason that you think you are. We have a trigger that comes in with you. This guy's doing this terrible stuff to me, and I'm upset about that. But really, the anger, the rage, comes from a deep internal place. It might be an authority wound from the past, when maybe it was authority from parents that you couldn't always trust, or it wasn't always in your best interest. That's with Saturn, but there's, besides authority wounds, there's wounds of other kinds. There's wounds of just having a father that you can feel good about, having the trust. There's wounds of mother wound, usually with the moon. You see, if Chiron is with the moon in your natal chart, you see a mother wound that has to do with that, the lack of what was proper nurturing and what you really would have appreciated. And, that can be a wound that you carry all your life, and then you gradually work through it, as you go through, and various other wounds. So just identifying, it's a good time for this, right, with this full moon, identifying the wounded parts of ourselves and being able to move beyond that to whatever extent we can. And the recipe is to first have the consciousness, to acknowledge the wounded place, and to be able to delve into it, to be able to think to yourself, oh, there's that coming up again when you do get angry, or when you do say no to something that you might have wanted to say yes to, but you somehow have that shyness come over you, and you say no, and then you think, why did I say no? And then you think, oh, that's that place again. And just paying attention to those things. You don't have to say that there's a change in behavior, radical change in behavior that is going to happen. That's maybe too much to ask immediately. But what you can say is, let me become more conscious. Let me just pay attention. Don't let it go by. Don't decide to ignore it. So paying attention to those things, very important at this time. Communication, as I said, very important. Telling our truth, very important. Deep thoughts, trying to figure out where we're at. How do I stand? Where's my moral compass directing me? What is my stand that I can take unequivocally, because we do have also, in this configuration with Chiron, we also have very much Eris. And Eris, feminine warrior for soul intention, is all about finding that deep place within you, because it does go to depth just like Pluto does within the psyche. Finding that place deep within you, that soul level of intention, and what is it about, and where do I stand, and what is my truth, and what can I do then to further that? Can I articulate it in a kind way? Can I at least keep it as a reference point, and then I know that's where I stand, that's where I am, and nothing can change that, right? Circumstances can arrive that are difficult, but you always have that internal truth that you stand for, and that frees you up in a certain way. That kind of makes you not quite so dependent on the shifting tide. It's very hard to do anything about these great forces, social forces that surround us, and that, there's things we can take a decision about and make a change, but there's things that we have to just make do with what there is, what comes down. So, it's difficult, but it's also very refreshing in a certain way. There's a possibility there of really finding your own way to go and sticking with that, and with the Saturn, the strong Saturn, being very determined in that stick-to-itiveness and not letting what's in the consensus, or your neighbors, or what other people are saying, not letting that get in your way of standing for your own truth. So, important timing and all this coming up pretty soon here, just Saturday afternoon. So that's what I had for you there, and let's see, transition back and just say, like I always do, wish you the best with that. We have not an easy situation, but it's always, our planet, they say, is a planet of fourth ray, which is harmony through conflict. And, when things are easy and everything goes smoothly and we have all the money and we don't have anything to worry about, we don't always get things done. But when we have the pressure and the situation gets desperate, they say when the going gets tough, the tough get going. And that's what we have to do. And we have to stick to our own standards. We have to uphold our own internal standards. And that's maybe the most important thing we can do right now. It's a way we can vote in our every moment, in our every action, in our every expenditure of money, and in every deed, and join a demonstration if that's what calls to you. All right. Best of luck again. Take care.